Our New Testament reading is from Mark's Gospel and chapter 1. Mark's Gospel and chapter 1. We're reading verses 29 to 34 of this chapter. Verses 21 to the end are a focus on miracles in the great Galilean ministry of Jesus. Chapter 2 moves on to the 5 conflict stories, but this section focuses on the miracles of Jesus and pulls out 3 of the many miracles which Jesus performed. One is on a leper at the end of the chapter. The first one in verse 21 to 28 is on a person who was demon-possessed. Our focus is on the miracle on Peter's mother-in-law in verses 29 to 34. Let's hear the word of the Lord. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. The miracles of Christ. The Mona Lisa is the most visited painting in the world. People describe this person as the most looked at woman in the world. And Posa, who is an art critic, an Italian art critic, describes the beauty of the painting, but with one defect, and that is that the lady cannot speak. Natasha Solomon has sought to rectify that defect by writing her latest book, imagining herself to be the Mona Lisa. And so the book is entitled, I, Mona Lisa. And the book is interesting, describing the journeys that the painting went on, the people who came to view it, the different locations in which the painting has been hung. And so this painting, which has remained silent for so long, has been able to speak. And it is one of the desires, perhaps, that we might have, that the people in this chapter, pinpointed by Mark, would be able to speak. Could you imagine if we could hear from Peter's mother-in-law what happened that day? Or from the leper in his hopelessness and despair and receiving the power of Christ upon him? Or from the demon-possessed in the synagogue, or the many others who experienced the almighty, gracious, healing power of Jesus Christ. The Galilean ministry of Jesus, stretching from chapter 1 to 8, was characterized by 2 main elements. They're recorded in verse number 39. He went throughout all Galilee, preaching and casting out demons. Jesus' ministry was marked by preaching and by healing. In the Gospels, there are 37 of Jesus' miracles recorded. And in Mark's Gospel, this is the one section that he devotes to a concentrated collation of the miracles of Jesus. This was not the first miracles of Jesus. These were not the first miracles of Jesus in Galilee. We know in John's Gospel that Jesus turned the water into wine in Cana of Galilee. We know that Jesus healed the centurion's son in Galilee. But Mark selects these miracles from the second year of Jesus' public ministry, this great Galilean ministry of Christ. We want to focus on the verses 29 to 34, which record the healing of Peter's mother-in-law and the ensuing events which succeeded that miracle of Christ. Let's think first of all of the reason for Jesus' miracles. Why did Jesus perform these many miracles? We read of them coming to the door at the evening in verse 34, and he healed many who were sick and cast out many demons. Why did Jesus perform these miracles? The question has been asked, and one theologian suggests 5 reasons for the miracles of Jesus. And the question is not that easy to answer, because in this section that we're looking at, there is this command of Jesus to the demons that they would not speak in verse number 34. We think that Jesus performed his miracles initially so that he would reveal himself and show his identity as the Son of God. And yet there is this counter activity of Jesus Christ to silence the demons who seem to be recognizing who he is. And so we have this conflicting idea of why Jesus performed the miracles. Was it to reveal himself? Then why is he commanding the demons to be silenced? We recognize that part of his reason was that the demons were no faithful witness to Jesus' identity. They had their own agenda in seeking to identify him as the Son of God, perhaps to stir up the wrong enthusiasm in the crowd to consider Christ as one who would head up a revolt against the Romans. And so Jesus is silencing these deceitful witnesses to his identity. And so we're pressed to come back to our question. Why does Jesus then continue to perform miracles? If his main purpose at this time is not to reveal his identity as the Son of God. True, he will come back to this idea in Matthew 11, and he will upbraid Capernaum where he is at this time and say, I did many mighty works among you, and you did not believe in me. But what was his intention in performing these many miracles? As perfect man, it was to glorify God. But what else was his reason? I think it was that he was expressing his compassion to the needy. In Mark's Gospel, Jesus never seeks the sick. In Mark, the sick are always brought to Jesus. We have this incredible statement here in verse 32, and it's in the present continuous tense. They brought to him all who were sick. And the idea is that there was this constant stream of people coming to him. He was here in Peter's house, which was the headquarters of his ministry in Galilee. Archaeologists, I think, have discovered Peter's house, a house of black basalt a house with sacred graffiti on the inside, a house which belonged to a group of houses which opened out onto a courtyard. And we can imagine this scene of this stream of sick people being brought to Jesus. And as he saw them, such was his heart, such was his compassion, that he reached out with his power and grace to heal them. In chapter 2 and verse 2, we have that brilliant story of the man being brought to Jesus and let down through the roof. And again in Mark's gospel, Jesus in Galilee, he's not going on a miracle mission. His main role is to preach the good news. But as he encounters the sick, as the sick are brought to him and placed in his very path, Jesus is moved with love and compassion towards the needy. The book by Sophie Thornhausen, The People's History of Clothing, is commended because it focuses on people. It's not just a book about silk or about linen or about cotton, which she does explore in its development and use in clothing, but she hones in on people. And Mark here, in his account, he discerns the reason for Jesus' miracles because he has an interest and a compassion for people. Yes, his deity is revealed. Yes, God is glorified, but people are helped. Now, over the years, I've had various discussions with church members about giving practical help to your neighbour. You take out their bin on the Wednesday. You might help them to cut their grass once a month. You run them to their doctor's appointment. And various church members have raised the point that we're to do this just out of pure compassion with no alternative motives. I'm doing it, and I would defend I'm doing it, that I might speak the gospel to them, that they'll listen more openly to the words of Christ. I'm not just doing it to help them get to their doctor's appointment. I'm doing it with the motive that this will be an opening to me to bring them the words of Christ. And I think that multi-layered approach is evident in Jesus' ministry here. He does show compassion for the needy. But he also has this message that he is the Savior, that he has come, that he is God incarnate, that his power and grace is a revelation of the compassion and heart of heaven. The reason for his miracles. Let's think secondly of the range of Jesus' miracles. The range of Jesus' miracles. There are miracles in which Jesus shows his control over nature. He calms the storm. There are those miracles where he takes the loaves and the fishes and he multiplies them. But most of Jesus' miracles are connected to individuals, to people, as Mark emphasizes in this chapter. The leper, the demon-possessed, the woman, this sample of the miracles of Christ in his great Galilean ministry. And those miracles on people are divided up in Mark's assessment of it in verse number 32. They brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And then in verse 34, he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. This division in Jesus' miracles between the sick and those who are possessed with demons, it emphasizes the reality and the work and the opposition of the demon possession. It's in a distinct group from those who were sick. In Mark's gospel, the range of sickness is wide. There are people with fever. There are people with leprosy. There are people with blindness. There are people who are dumb. There are people who are lame. There are people who have even died. But such is the authority, such is the lordship of Christ over everything, that he heals many who were sick. But also he casts out many who were demon-possessed. Jesus exercises his authority and his rule even over the fallen spirits. There is this incredible onslaught by the powers of darkness unto the ministry of Christ, this opposition and rejection of Jesus' work, which is concentrated in chapters 1 to 8 of Mark's gospel. There is no demon-possessed person mentioned after chapter 8 of his gospel. Here, at the outset of Jesus' great Galilean ministry, we have this tide of antagonism against Jesus. But Jesus conquers them and triumphs over them and rebukes them and silences them and casts them out. The one miracle that Mark focuses on that we're considering is of Peter's mother-in-law. They had been in the synagogue, and a sample of casting out demons is given in the synagogue. And now, as was the custom and still our custom, they go home for their Sunday lunch, their Sabbath day lunch. And they come into the house and they tell Jesus, the text says, of Peter's mother-in-law who is unwell. And Jesus, out of compassion and sympathy and care, he heals her. He takes her by the hand and lifts her up. And the text says here that she began to serve them. Compared with the other two miracles in this chapter, it is minimalistic. It is light. It is pretty small. She probably had the common fever, which was around that area of the depressed Lake of Galilee. But it's nothing compared with the demon being cast out in the synagogue or the leper being healed. And yet, Mark has this incredible lesson for us right at the end of his record of the miracle. And she began to serve them. Here is the one who had been served. She serves. And we need to linger on this point, because this is one of his key points in this miracle and one of his key themes in his book. His key text is chapter 10 and verse 45. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. And here is this woman, nameless. A miracle which is perhaps less startling than the others around it, and yet there is this tremendous lesson embedded in it, that when she was healed, she served them. We're in Capernaum here. We're in Peter's house here. And this lady served. And these 3 points are really significant in Mark's gospel. Because in chapter 9 and verse 38, we're back in the same town, Capernaum. And we're back in the same house, Peter's house. It's a year on. The disciples have been with Jesus. Many things have happened. They've been on their mission. They've performed miracles. They've grown in their knowledge and character and graces. But they've come back again to this very same spot in Capernaum. And it's different this time. Jesus, you remember, asks the disciples, what were you talking about on the way? And they didn't answer him because along the way they were disputing who was the greatest. In this very same house, in the very same town, Jesus, the text says to them, he who is first, let him be servant of all. And did he point out the mother-in-law and remind them of what she did a year ago? She began to serve them. It's not just children who say, that's not my job. The reason for his miracles, the range of his miracles, and thirdly, the radicalness of Jesus' miracles. This is a striking point of the miracles of Jesus in this chapter, and the seeds of that radicalness are sown here, which will be explored in the next chapter in the 5 confrontation stories between Jesus and the scribes and Pharisees of Jerusalem. The rulers of Jesus' time, they followed what was known as the tradition of the elders. This was a set of legislation which the Pharisees had drawn up, which sought to guide the common people. They sought to interpret God's Old Testament laws and set down rules which would steer the people in the practical application of those rules. But those rules were burdensome. And Jesus, in his miracles here, he breaks many of those rules, driven by pure compassion. Out of incredible mercy and love, Jesus breaks through much of the tradition and legislation that surrounded the Sabbath day. You see the people here in verse number 32, that at evening, at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed. The Sabbath was ended at sunset. The rabbi's law was when you could see 3 stars in the sky, the Sabbath was over. And so the people, afraid of rebuke or excommunication, they would not bring the sick to Jesus until after sunset. There was rules about who you could carry and where you could carry and what you could carry on the Sabbath day. But Jesus was not tied by such legislation or rules. Out of compassion and mercy and driven by a love for humanity, he heals on the Sabbath day. All other kinds of rules surrounded the people who were ill. Rabbis were not allowed to touch women. But Jesus, in this miracle, Mark says, in verse 31, he took her by the hand. The tradition of elders had rules about how close you could come to the person deceased. It had legislation about cures for those with a fever, which included hanging knives on a bush. Jesus sets aside all such tradition and in a radical manner, out of pure compassion for the oppressed. he heals this woman on the Sabbath day. Jeff Bezos wants the bridge in Rotterdam dismantled to let his £430 million Euro yacht to glide out into the ocean. That's a radical move, isn't it? It's been there for ages that the council has given a ruling that it won't be touched, and yet this figure who is radical in himself wants this dismantled. And here is Jesus, and he is radical in his miracles, driven by the honor of God, the compassion for those who are needy. And I think we all find it a challenge, don't we, in our age, in our time of man-made rules. We've all found it a challenge. With our seating, with our masks, with the isolation, the distance, to express our compassion and love for one another. But we've got to find a way. Here is Christ with all those man-made legislations. He finds a way to love the needy. And Roy and Sandra need to know somehow that you care for them. And Joel and Laura need to know how delighted you were that Daniel was here at church. And new people in this congregation need to know somehow that you're delighted that they're here. The range of Jesus' miracles. The reason for Jesus' miracles. The radicalness of Jesus' miracles. The era of miracle workers is over, but not the era of miracles. We are cessationists in our denomination. We believe the supernatural gifts of tongues and prophecy and miracle working has ended, but not the fact that God cannot perform miracles today. I sat in a Bible study and was taught that miracles don't happen today. But I was glad that before I'd gone to the Bible study, I'd read Louis Burkhoff, who maintained miracles can happen by our almighty and powerful God today. And wouldn't that help us in our praying? Maybe we need to be rebuked as the Puritan minister rebuked one of his congregants that his God was too small. The era of miracle workers is over, but not the era of compassion. As church members and leaders, we don't have the ability to perform miracles, but we all can show compassion. We can't heal the sick, but we can honor the sick. We can hear the sick. We can help the sick. We can host the sick. The range of his miracles, the radicalness of his miracles, the reason of his miracles. We sing in closing.